I was looking at you and listening to your beautiful voice and thinking that I think this is the first time that you've come up to lead since your bat mitzvah day. And so today is really a fulfillment of what you promised, the beginning of the fulfillment of what you promised on your bat mitzvah day, which is to be a participant in the community and to share your gifts and your questions and your wonderfulness with the community. I hope we get to hear you many, many, many more times. I want to just share a little bit of something that we can think about together as we go into the Torah reading this morning. I remembered most things I was supposed to remember, but I didn't remember to bring myself a chumash. So if I could have one. Thank you. We have a very, very full Torah service this morning with a lot of things to celebrate. Multiple life cycle transitions, some really, really beautiful and special ones, and, well, they're all beautiful and special. And just a reminder to us the way our tradition has created this structure for us. When we open the Torah, we're meant to tie it to the transitions in our lives. It's part of us. We're part of it. So I want to take a look with you at a particular theme that's in Parashat Yitro, which is what we're reading this week. We've been reading it all week, and then on Shabbat, we really read it. We're going to get to hear the 10 Commandments today, and as I'm sure our marvelous Rabbi Ken Avner will remind us, it's a custom to stand when we get to the 10 Commandments. It's a signal or a symbol for us that we all stood at Sinai. We're still standing at Sinai. Sinai is still happening. But I actually want to turn to something a little bit different this morning, and that is Yitro. Who is Yitro? Moses' father-in-law, known in Jewish tradition by a number of different names, but Yitro, the most famous. He keeps showing up in the Torah. More than Tzipporah, Moses' wife, much more than Tzipporah, and more than other characters who you would think of as having more yichus, more, genealogical, what is this, like zechut, than he has, but he turns out to be really, really important. And I was wondering about this again this year, and I started with reminding myself about what a train wreck Moses' family of origin was. Louis, you can't hear? It's here. Can people hear? Okay. And why am I bringing this up? Because Yitro plays an important role, in a sense, as Moses' surrogate father. His advisor, but also, I think, his surrogate father. So, scope out for a minute with me, and let's take a look at Moses' family of origin for a second. He's born into a situation that teaches us a lot about how government policies can cause enormous family trauma. I'm not making a joke. Yeah. So the story of Moses' birth is, I love this. It comes through Midrash, actually. The story is that the Egyptian regime had decreed that baby boys born to Hebrew mothers, Hebrew families, would be in the Nile. Baby girls could live, but not a good life. In reaction to that, according to the Midrash, Moses' father, Amram, says, I'm withdrawing in every way. He leaves his wife. He sends her away. No more children. I can't do this. I'm too dejected and discouraged, and I just can't do this anymore. And according to the Midrash, it's Miriam as a child that says, no. I have a vision. I am seeing something. There's a baby boy that's yet to come into this family. So she says to her parents, you get back in the bedroom right now. This is not over. And thank God she did that, because, in fact, somebody pretty important did get born. But he's born into this family where his father is so depressed and dejected that he's pulled himself away. And Amram, we don't hear from him ever again in the Torah. He's just, Yocheved, Yocheved, with the word honor and kavod, like the weightiness of honor is built into her name. She stays close to that baby. She knows not only does she love him because he's her own, but because the text tells us she thinks that there's something important about his life that needs to be saved. And so Moses, we know the story. He gets put in the basket and he gets adopted. But then again, he gets raised in a situation where I don't think the Pharaoh is much of a father to him. Maybe Pharaoh's daughter is a loving mother, and he's got a lot of strong women around him, but there's no father figure for him. And look what he is asked to do. Look what he is called to do in his life with no strong male presence in his life. So it's really a big deal that Yitro shows up in the way he does. Moses meets Yitro when he's just fled Egypt for the first time and begun to grapple with his own identity, his own true identity. And I was reminding myself, I had to look this up, when Moses goes to the burning bush, when he has his own personal theophany, as kind of a warm-up for the big communal theophany, what is he doing? What is he doing? He takes off his shoes, but before he gets there, why is he out? Whose flock is he shepherding? Yitro's. So his whole livelihood, his whole sense of purpose, until that moment, is tied to Yitro, this father-in-law whose name means, yoter, more, expanded, robust, plenty. Okay, so Yitro plays that important role in Moses' life. And then in this parasha, Yitro opens the parasha by showing up. And this custom that we have of always looking back to what we read last week to see where we ended, just like they do on TV. You can't press skip intro on your little Netflix button. Last week, the parasha ended with the war against Amalek. So the community survived and came through that, but they just came through a war. And Yitro shows up now as a grounding, practical presence for Moses and by extension for the whole community of Bnei Israel before what? What's coming next? Sinai. So there's these two huge dramatic moments. Yitro, the father, shows up to say, I have advice, I have provisions, I brought your wife, your son, you should be with your family. He arrives and Moses takes him into the tent so they can have a one-on-one coaching session. Yitro famously says to Moses, I see what you're trying to do here, and it's nuts. Let's have a system here. Let's delegate. You've got a lot of good people here. Trust, enlist. So in a way, he kind of saves Moses' life in that moment because he sees Moses is getting ready to do something really important. But here's where the Midrash, again, throws us a curveball or gives us, an out, in a sense. The parasha begins, Vayishma Yitro. Vayishma Yitro. Yitro heard, understood, absorbed, Vayishma Yitro. So keep that phrase in your mind. That's Exodus 18, verse 1. I don't have the page number in front of me, but if you want to open to it, you can. 508. 508 in this Chumash. In Tractate Zevachim, in the Talmud, we get a glimpse of the rabbi's discussion about what was it that Yitro heard, Vayishma Yitro, that made him run and show up and say, wait, Moses, I need to see you. I have stuff for you. I'm going to read you this little excerpt from the Midrash. The Torah states with regard to Yitro, before he came to Mount Sinai, quote, now Yitro, priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, I'm smiling because somewhere in my reading of getting ready for today, one modern-day rabbi calls Yitro Rabbah Midian, like the rabbi of Midian. he was a spiritual leader in his own right. Moses' father-in-law heard of all that God had done for Moses, for Israel and his people, how God had brought Israel out of Egypt. So that supposes that somewhere, wherever Yitro was, at home in Midian, heard, oh, the children of Israel came across the sea. That happened last week. And then they prevailed in this encounter with Amalek. Some good things are happening for the children of Israel, at least. What tiding did he hear that he came and converted? Because Yitro shows up and says, I see this God is something special, and I even have a sacrifice to offer to acknowledge how much I appreciate the truth of this God. So the rabbis say, well, what was it that he heard that made him suddenly feel so connected and that he wanted to join the community? Rabbi Yehoshua says he heard about the war with Amalek because it's written adjacent to these verses. It says at the end of last week's parasha, he heard about the war, and that's what made him come. There are a few other opinions. Rabbi Elazar Hamodai says he heard about the giving of the Torah, and that's what made him come. So this is where the rabbis dispense with the inconvenience of linear time. And they move the pieces of the puzzle around and say, actually, what really happened is that Yitro showed up after Sinai. He heard the Ten Commandments being given, and that's what made him run and say, I need to be part of this. This is going to be something great. This is going to be something lasting. I want to get on board. So all of this left me thinking about that opening phrase, Vayishma Yitro. Now there's a very famous and important core understanding of religious life that we have in our tradition, and that is Na'aseh v'nishma. People are familiar with that. Na'aseh v'nishma. It's what the children of Israel say in next week's parasha, in Parashat Mishpatim. Na'aseh, we will do, v'nishma. We will understand, we will hear, we will accept. You can translate it many different ways. This week, before Sinai, before the actual giving of the Ten Commandments, there's a moment when the question is brought to them, are you ready for this, children of Israel? And they say, Na'aseh. They say, we will do it. They don't say Na'aseh v'nishma. They just say Na'aseh, we will do. And you almost have a feeling like they're like, there's thunder and lightning on the mountain is smoking, I don't know. Just tell us, we'll do it, okay? We've been through a lot. We need to have some peace here. I don't know, that's my midrash. But they don't get to Nishma until next week, until the Ten Commandments get refined and distilled in next week's parasha, which, if you're not familiar, you can take a peek and see. It's Parashat Mishpatim is where the author of the Torah picks up a whole different voice. Well, depending on who you ask, maybe that it is a different author who starts taking the Ten Commandments and pulling them apart and saying, well, this one refers to these 10 things, and there are many, many more details, and it's only with that fuller delivery of the system that the children of Israel start to say, okay, Nishma, we also are starting to get it. So it seems significant to me that Yitro shows up with Vayishma. He brings that missing link of listening and understanding that the children of Israel don't yet have when they're about to hear the Ten Commandments. He says, I hear something important here. I'm not just willing to do it, I'm going to engage with it. I'm going to receive it, accept it. There are a number of important people that show up in our sacred texts who are here to teach us Torah, who are not Jewish, who are not Hebrews. The two that stand out most are Yitro and Ruth, who turns out to be, as we know famously, the ancestor of King David. It's a way that our ancient ancestors were saying to us, stay in touch with the people around you. Invite them into your circle. They may bring you insights into your own tradition that you can't yet see. Open the door for them. Help them learn and feel part of you, and welcome them in so that you also can fully hear the Torah that you are meant to hear. So that's what I'm inviting us to hear when we listen to the 10 Commandments today, and to imagine Yitro coming in, maybe just as the 10th was being delivered, to stand with the children of Israel and say, Ani shomea. I'm listening. Let's go to our Torah service, our readings.